Hi, I'm Dr. John Bergsma, and this is Bible Basics and Beyond. The first covenant of salvation history is the Adamic or creation covenant, and we're going to draw it. Little known fact, all of the covenants in salvation history were made on mountaintops, and that facilitates our illustrating them. The first mountain in salvation history is Mount Eden. So we're going to draw that in with an easy semicircle there and label that Mount Eden. You can figure out that Eden is a mountain from Genesis 2, if you think about it, but Ezekiel tells us so explicitly when he describes it as Mount Eden in Ezekiel chapter 28. And in any event, here's this mountaintop on the top of which was a garden. So we're going to draw in some elements of the garden here. And the major element that we're going to draw is the tree of life. Okay, so that's our tree of life, pretty easy to do. Let's draw a few apples on it. I always draw 4 because after extensive research in my doctoral program, I came to the conclusion there were exactly 4 apples on the tree of life. I'll put those in there. And then there was also a reality we call the river of life that flows out of the garden. And a few swirly lines, 2 swirly lines like that gives us the effect of a river. That's mentioned in Genesis 2:10. Write that in there. The tree is mentioned in Genesis 2:9. All right, so tree of life, river of life, that's all the food that you need to stay alive forever. That's the drink that you need to stay alive forever. The Garden of Eden is this place of perfect beauty that can provide immortality to the human person. So another feature that we're going to sketch in here is some gold. Okay, a couple verses later in Genesis 2:12, it mentions that as the river flows out of the garden, it goes through the land of Havilah, where there is gold and precious stones. And this is an important element of the Adamic covenant and of Eden, because Eden was the original sanctuary, the original temple. Let's call it a temple garden. And for a sanctuary or a place of worship, you need precious materials to adorn it. And that's where the gold and the jewels come in. In the later sanctuaries of salvation history, like the tabernacle built by Moses in the wilderness, or the temple built in Jerusalem by Solomon, there will be an abundance of gold and jewels, just like to this very day. We adorn, say, a tabernacle where the Blessed Sacrament is reserved with the most precious and expensive materials that we can afford, even gold plate and encrusted jewels. That's a natural instinct in the human person to adorn the place of God's worship with the most precious materials possible. And so the sacred author lets us know that Eden had available these resources of precious materials nearby to make the garden of God's worship beautiful in a way that was appropriate to the worship of God in that location. So we, of course, have our first human pair. So we will sketch them in here. Here's Adam and our lovely mother Eve, wearing the latest in stick figure fashion, a little Christian Dior triangle dress there. And they are in a perfect relationship in this garden with God in the vertical relationship and with nature in the horizontal relationship. And that's one of the points of Eden, is this concept of what we call shalom, which is a rich Hebrew word meaning peace, most basically, but also wholeness. Shalom is a situation where everything is as it should be. And that's what we have in the Garden of Eden. Perfect peace with God as Adam and Eve are son and daughter of God. God is their father. That's the nature of a covenant relationship, is to form a family. And because they are in that perfect peace with God, they're also at perfect peace with the environment. That's a biblical principle that when your relationship with God is right, then your relationship with the world will be right as well. That's why our Lord, in perfect relationship with his Father, can also command the sea and the sky to be quiet. He can tell the fish to get into the net, and they all obey him. Nature obeys him because he is in right relationship with God. Likewise, St. Francis of Assisi, in a peaceful relationship with God the Father, also able to communicate according to tradition with the birds, the wolves, etc. So we have mankind here as son and daughter of God in perfect peace with nature. One other element that we can put in is the presence of angels. Angels were in Eden, just as they are present at every Mass. The angels always accompany the worship of God. At the end of the story, one of the angels gets a sword to keep the couple out, but that's getting ahead of ourselves. That's what we're going to call the fall into sin. But this picture of our first parents in a situation of peace as son and daughter of God and shalom with all nature, this is God's intention for the Adamic or creation covenant.